Today's reading is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, beginning at the 16th verse. To what can I compare this generation? They're like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others. We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her deeds. And then moving on to verse 25. At that time Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned, and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden light. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise be to you, O Christ. One of the lessons that very small children learn in the nursery is that, well, simply, life isn't fair and we human beings are not in charge. However much we might want to battle on in our own strength, it's God who is in control. And this is a cause for giving great thanks for, because as in our humanity, we have free will. We have failings. We want to go our own way, and we will always mess up. And today we've had that prayer of confession at the beginning of this service to remind us of that. The first part of this reading from Matthew's Gospel is a story which Jesus tells to illustrate the perversity of human nature. To him, the people seem to be restless in the way that children sometimes are when they are being, well, contrary. Contrary, just not knowing what they want. I remember when our children were young that they'd want to play something and then they'd decide they didn't. And then they'd want to do something else and then they'd decide they didn't want to do that either. And actually, nothing would make them happy. They would feel unsettled. And what Jesus is saying is that the generation to whom he was ministering to were actually behaving just like that, like small children. The reading then picks up again at verse 25 with Jesus praying. He's thanking his Father because the Father has hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent and actually revealed the treasures of the kingdom to infants. So who are the wise and the intelligent? Or maybe those who reject Jesus and his message. And perhaps especially Jesus is referring to the religious leaders whom he often rebukes for their self-importance and hypocrisy. The scribes and the Pharisees pride themselves on being learned in matters of the law, and yet failing to understand the basics of justice and mercy and compassion. And they repeatedly reject Jesus and conspire against him, thus appearing to conspire against the very purposes of God. And so, if those are the wise and the intelligent, who then are the infants? Well, maybe those not regarded in society as wise or important. Those who are poor in spirit, the meek, the merciful, the persecuted, all of those, in fact, who Jesus calls blessed in the Sermon on the Mount. They are the sick and the lame, the lepers, the demon-possessed, the tax collectors and the sinners, those who come to Jesus for healing in body and spirit. And there is a deep mystery here which takes us right to the heart of the Christian gospel. Jesus says you just need to be like a child. You don't need to study books about me. You need to experience my living presence and listen for my voice. Children learn by watching and listening and imitating, don't they? And that's what Jesus called his disciples to do. These disciples were ordinary folk who were called to be with him. Jesus is, if you like, for them and indeed for us, a window onto the living God. And it's through his words and actions that people can really understand what God is like. Jesus' prayer then turns to an invitation to those who are listening, but also to us. Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. In the first century, people were labouring under the harsh religious and political systems. And Jesus was saying to them, yes, come to me, and I will give you rest. I am the living water. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Can it be that easy? Well, Jesus also said that people had to be prepared to leave behind family, possessions, maybe even their own lives. But there is joy, there is refreshment, there is hope that springs from the character of who he is. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, Jesus who brings gentleness and warmth and compassion and restoration. Jesus says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So what is that yoke? Well, that's something that Jesus would have made in a carpenter's shop. It's basically that wooden frame joining two animals, usually oxen, at the neck, enabling them to pull heavy loads, perhaps a plough or a wagon, but not pulling on their own, pulling together. The function of a yoke is to make a burden easier to carry. And so Jesus is encouraging us to bring all that weighs us down to him and to come to his loving and welcoming presence. Jesus invites the weary to learn from him, for he is gentle and humble in heart. His yoke is easy, maybe better translated as good or kind, and his burden is light. To take Jesus' yoke upon ourselves is to be yoked with the one in whom God's kingdom of justice and mercy and compassion continues to break through into this world day by day. Jesus is the one who gives rest for the soul. And in the past few months, we have experienced long days and long weeks. And many of us will feel that we have been and perhaps continue to carry weary and heavy burdens of many and various kinds, and perhaps have a deep longing for rest. And Jesus says to each and every one of us, come, rest deeply and securely in my grace. One of my favourite Old Testament verses is from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of trouble. So we now have our second song. It's Rock of Ages, Cleft for Me. And in fact, the singer of this song is our daughter-in-law, Kat.